Okay, it is recording. So, welcome, Ken Blackman. Um, Ken is going to introduce himself in a moment, but what I know is he's a phenomenal relationship coach, and he'll tell you more about that. And today we're gonna have a conversation about a couple topics, but one thing that I found out about in meeting Ken and listening to a couple other talks or interviews with him is that he has this sort of concept called relationship ESP. And one of the things, Ken, that I would love to hear about is how someone can begin on that journey of kind of developing or noticing their relationship ESP. So please
Wonderful.
tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I've been working with people and kind of in the relationship space of what it takes to have good relationships, good sex, good communication, the intimacy that we all crave for about 20 years. And primarily I focus on couples, like, I primarily work with committed couples. But for me, it's in the bigger picture of we all being hungry for this nutrient of connection. And so this is kind of my domain in which I'm working in order to expand the total amount of human connection in the world. That's my bigger goal.
That's your mission.
Yeah. And so this idea of relationship ESP, there's a few things that I want to say about it. First of all, I believe that we're drawn to relationship because we're hungry for this nutrient that I'm calling connection. And I'm not even giving a definition of it, but it's just the thing that you can experience with another human being that you can't experience anywhere else. Like, you can have a great life on your own, fantastic life on your own. You can eat the best food, you can go downhill ski the best slopes, you can have an amazing life. And then there's this thing that is not reducible to anything else. And if you don't have it, there's no substitute for it. I won't say you miss it or you won't miss it. A lot of people do hunger for it, but it can't be reduced. You need another human being in order to experience this thing. So that, to me, is the basis of when I'm working with a couple or I'm working with anyone. That's actually, in my mind, why they're together, because there is this opportunity to experience connection and build a life together and have intimacy. That is the reason we're drawn to each other. Now, a lot of us don't have relationship skills. We're not emotionally, we don't have emotional intelligence. We're not fully tied into our own emotions or understanding our partner's emotions. We're not clean with our emotions. We don't know how to feel them without wreckage. And so what we have instead, if we're out in the world, is guidelines and rules and kind of heuristics that we use to operate in the world. And I was one of those people. I was a software engineer, and I was terrible with women. And long story short, I needed to learn that the part of my brain, and I say this to my clients, the part of your brain that is trying to turn this into a formula, that's trying to get the rule book that you can follow, that part of your brain is not going to serve you in relationships. There's this other part of your brain that feels and senses and intuits and doesn't make sense. It's typically irrational. That is actually the something you need to cultivate and develop in order to actually have the thing that you're here to have, right? Using the language of business deals and car repair isn't going to get you into the territory that you're here in this relationship to have. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is that somewhat akin to, people talk about emotional intelligence or?
All these things are tied to each other, and the brain regions are connected to each other. The brain regions that are the seat of our emotions are the same brain regions that sense another person's emotions.
Mm.
And like evolutionarily speaking, emotions developed in social animals. Emotions are a form of communication. That's part of their purpose.
Mm.
If I'm scared and that is contagious, right? If because I'm scared, you also get scared, that is evolutionarily advantageous for the group.
Mm. Got it.
So
For protection and
yeah. So we share emotions, and the part of our brain that's trying to analyze it and understand it at an intellectual level, like she made this expression, and when she makes this expression, it means this. So there are schools of thought that use that method. I move away from that method. And this could be a place where we have a really rich conversation about it, because
yeah, I mean, what really caught my attention about what you were saying is many people are looking for a rule book. They're looking for obvious tips that kind of produce a result, and that's very compelling. I mean, it would be great to have that rule book or that playbook. And what you seem to be talking about was learning how to sense in a relationship, learning how to develop a relational intelligence,
right.
to know how you're doing. So one thing I'd like to talk to you about is how does somebody learn that?
Yeah.
What does that process look like? I'm familiar with some of that from an NLP perspective, but I'm curious what your
Yeah. It's likely that my approach is different than NLP.
mm-hmm.
This is how I explain it and how I work with people. So I want to use a metaphor. In the poultry industry, meaning chicken farms, in the 1920s, there was this major problem. And the problem is that you need to separate the male chicks from the female chicks. And you can't look at a chick's butt and tell whether it's male or female. It's called sexing chicks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a major problem. And in Japan, there was this school that you could send one of your people to get trained in like something like 6 weeks of training in how to identify the sex of a chick. And this is how the training was done. The student sits with a bucket of chicks. He picks one up and he looks at its butt and he randomly makes a guess, male. Behind him is standing the teacher. And the teacher gives him feedback and says, correct or not correct. So, like male, correct, puts it in this bucket. Male, incorrect, puts it in this bucket. Female, incorrect, puts it in this bucket. Male, correct, puts it in this bucket. So that training is like 8 hours a day for 6 weeks. And by the time they're done, the student has like a 90% accuracy rate, or a 95, or not, something very high, like above 90% accuracy rate. But he has no idea how he knows, and the teacher has no idea how he knows.
And I heard you talk about this, and what I love about this story is it's one of the cleanest examples of unconscious learning that I've ever heard. And it's your nervous system is learning it, and there's no participation of the conscious mind.
Right. So early on in my training as a guy who was a nerdy, geeky, logical, reasonable, rational, analytical thinker, to being a feeler who could actually have intimate relationships and get fulfilled by it. On the way, early on, I had a partner, a lover, who was dedicated to being honest and dedicated to whoever she's dating is kind of hipped up, like knows what's going on. And so I had leeway with her to say, are you upset right now? Or did that just make you jealous? Or you seem down,
Mm.
or are you angry? Whatever I thought I was feeling.
Mm.
And she wouldn't just say no, or, like if it was true, no matter how uncomfortable it was, she would tell me that it was true, because it was more valuable for her, for me to get my spidey sense confirmed when it's true.
Mm.
It was more valuable to her to have a guy who could sense her that cleanly,
Mm.
than it was for anything that she would get by hiding what was true. So she was dedicated to the uncomfortable truth. And if it wasn't true, she would kind of introspect and see what might be true inside of her that might explain and help us understand what it was I thought I was feeling.
So she was the person standing behind you, tapping you
Yeah,
on the shoulder
that's
and
correct.
saying, yeah.
Right. And man, if you do that a few hundred times, like get honest feedback, you start with your guess. You're not being told. You begin with what your intuition thinks is true. Then you get the feedback on whether it's true or not. And slowly but surely your spidey sense is honed and polished, and it starts to get more accurate. And there gets to be this whole body of accurate sensing
Mm.
that you can't explain intellectually. You don't know how you know.
Mm.
And so one of the things I had to do, and one of the things I do with my clients, is I say, the part of you that's trying to analyze this has to step out of the way, so that the intuitive part of you can start to develop something that you're not going to understand how you know. You're just going to learn. You're just going to start to know.
Mm.
And then it starts, like, over time, you start to know things, and you, without knowing how you know, like, that's critical. That's a critical component of this, that you deliberately decide not to intellectualize your knowledge.
Mm.
Because
And how long does that last? Immediately, I felt like, oh my gosh, how long am I in this sea of not knowing, as one of my teachers likes to say.
well, what I mean is that you start to know without consciously intellectualizing how you know. Like
Got it.
I had to do the work to not kind of have my analytical mind step in, and like I said before, like, oh, she had this particular, expression. She had this particular thing she did, and that means this and this and this. Like, that part of my brain had to get out of the way enough for this other part of my brain that is actually the part of us that intimate relating is, it's like intimately connected with the part of with why we're in relationship in the first place.
So Ken, when you're working with someone, are you playing the role of the person tapping them on their shoulder
Often.
initially? Because I have to imagine that, not for any nefarious reasons, but a lot of times our partner may not know how to report consciously on whether it's like green light or red light.
Yeah. Now I'm going to talk about all the pitfalls of this method.
Okay, great.
Number one, it takes practice for the person giving the feedback to do it cleanly and clearly. They may not know what's true about them. It may be excruciating to admit first to themselves what's true. Yeah, I got jealous from that. And then it might be excruciating for them to say that. So there's a bunch of barriers, like the person who's giving the feedback needs to practice to get better at it. That's the first thing. The second thing is, wow, like the person who's developing their intuition has to be aware of their own preferences. Like, how much am I projecting onto you? Am I actually seeing you clearly, or am I projecting my own wants and desires and what I like? Or am I being manipulative? Am I just saying something to fuck with you, right? All of these things have to be these are the risks, because it really is it's kind of a flamethrower that I'm putting in these people's hands. Like, this is a very powerful tool, but you have to be careful how you use it.
Mm.
And so, yeah, there are times when I'm in there as the guide to show them how to do it, to call each of them out on the ways that they're like, trying to use this system in ways that aren't actually, like, there's a deep, 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 deep level of trust that's required. And so that's partly why I mainly work with committed couples. You guys have said you want to create a partnership together.
Mm.
So we're not messing around here. Like, you guys have skin in the game to make this relationship good.
Mm.
Right? So
Yeah, it's interesting, because if you're developing this sense of are you developing a sense of what somebody likes or what works for them? Or I guess what I'm saying is it all about calibrating to what that person wants, to what my partner wants? And so then it becomes a question of kind of what's driving the relationship. Is it all about you get all your wants, I get all my wants, or we're creating a mutual vision? Or
yeah, well,
that
I
may be
don't.
another topic.
Well, it's a topic that I don't think we can get into without, like, now we're going to have to talk about gender, because I think there
Mm.
are some aspects here. So I work with a variety of different, like, orientations and genders.
Mm.
Like, I work with couples who are experimenting with an open relationship where they're not sexually exclusive. They're committed to each other, but they're not
Mm.
sexually exclusive. I coach poly couples. I've coached, lesbian couples.
Mm.
But a lot of the work that I do is with a conventional, committed, cis, hetero man and a woman couple. And so in order to answer your question, I'm going to speak in that language.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone who doesn't fit that model among your audience, hopefully
Mm.
can do the translation and see whatever relates to them. But I'm going to say men are like this and women are like this, knowing that is just it's a language that lets me talk about a certain thing. Okay.
And from hearing you speak before, it's also about male and female archetypes. So
Right.
the roles can be reversed. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
The roles very much can be reversed. A lot
Mm.
of the stuff that I say about men,
Mm.
or excuse me, a lot of the stuff I say about women is true about me. And a lot of the stuff that I say about men is true of, the people that I date.
Mm.
So,
Got it.
but I'm going to use kind of cis hetero, like, conventional languaging for this. So the typical case is he's the rational one. Like, women are just given more permission culturally to develop their emotional self of the kind that is actually valuable for relationships. So a man comes in and they'll get into an argument and he'll say, "You're being totally irrational right now."
Mm.
And he thinks he thinks he's won the argument because he's right. And he's not confronting that he also has emotions that he's not fully connected to, and his emotions also are irrational. And he's going to have to drop the concept that rationality is the right tool for the relationship. He also include, as well as she is going to have emotions. They're not going to follow his idea of what he's supposed to be feeling, and it's part of the relationship. So I'm now you're going to have to remind me what question I'm answering here.
Well, I guess the question was coming from a place of if, as I'm learning this kind of relational ESP, is it all about me giving my partner what
Oh,
they want?
right.
or like you said before, or am I trying to manipulate them to give me what I want?
Right.
Uh,
Okay. Got
or
it.
is there a merging? Are we trying to go where we want?
Yeah. So this is nuanced. The ultimate answer is that both people they're both getting their wants and their needs and their desires met. That's the destination.
Okay.
But the road there is slightly different. So my experience has been that women know how to please their partner, but often their own desire gets left in the lurch. And for example, in the bedroom, it's often the case that a woman is producing more pleasurable sensation in his body than what she's feeling in her own. So there's a lot of vicarious, and that, again, in the bedroom specifically, a guy knows what he wants, but he might know a little bit better what feels good to him, and use that as his guide more than knowing what she wants and use that as his guide. So there is a way in which I focus the two of them on her pleasure, because when she's abundant, he gets what he wants. Like when she starts to be in a state of surplus and abundance and actually getting, her getting pleasure and getting love and getting intimacy, it's easier for her to turn on her spigot, and naturally he gets what he wants. So there is this way in which I orient them towards what her needs are. But there is a danger that he's being manipulative. Like he's not expressing what he wants. He's not going for what he wants. He's not like, he's just trying to create a covert contract, what's called a covert contract.
Right.
He's trying to oblige her, which is different.
Yeah, and right before we hopped on the call here, we were talking about the idea of I think I can have amazing relationship, ESP, that leads to a friendship, perhaps, versus a romantic relationship, and how do you navigate that space?
Yeah, that is a pitfall. I'll just speak for myself here, that I was constantly, unknowingly, like I didn't realize I was doing this, but in the ways that I was acting and behaving and relating, I was broadcasting to her. I was communicating to her in an unspoken way my own not fully developed relationship to my own sexuality. And so once there's a couple pieces that need to be in place. First, I needed to stop being manipulative, because in the beginning I didn't really have a healthy view of women. Like I wasn't relating with them as a fellow human being. I was kind of treating them like a video game. Like, what's the sequence of moves that I need to do? Like I was strategic, and I wasn't fully in this place of actually two sensing human beings, two real, live, complex human beings having an intimate moment. So that was the first people. I needed to drop my strategic and actually see this other human being and connect with her. That was the first piece. But then after that, everything had to do with my self-esteem and how I felt about myself. And I didn't have to change how I behaved. There was no behavioral coaching I was going to get that was going to help. Once I changed how I feel about myself and my self-esteem, women naturally gravitated to me. The behavior changed itself. So because of that, I focus on mindset coaching rather than behavioral training. And I don't consider myself a dating coach. Like I don't give dating advice.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Somebody shared that with me about you. Yeah, I was thinking about. I'm sure you're aware of David Data's work, and I guess what he talks about is when the gender archetypes get too aligned, then you get a best friend. But when there's more polarity between them, even alternating, then you get more connection or love or sexuality and passion.
Yeah. I would say it slightly different. I don't think I love David Deda's work. I don't personally actually operate in this kind of concept. Like, he has a very well developed like paradigm of
Ethos.
masculine and feminine. And I don't really operate in that paradigm, but I do believe in polarity. And so this is how I would phrase it. Two people need commonality in order to have things that they agree on and do together and relate with each other. They need polarity so that they're not jockeying for the same position and not meeting each other. So they need to be different enough from each other that one person can be playing this role and another person can be in the role that meets them. So, for example, the fact that you can have a steak dinner, you can cook a steak dinner with somebody and you both really enjoy it is commonality of, yeah, we both really dig this steak dinner. The fact that one of you is an expert in cooking the steak and the other one is an expert in cooking the asparagus is polarity, and it means you have different roles because different roles are needed. If you both were doing steak, you need to not be jockeying for the same position. So, for example, if I'm constantly wanting to be the one who's messed up and needing a hero to come in, she never gets to be the one who's messed up and needs a hero to come in. If I'm constantly the one who takes the lead and makes things happen and says, don't worry, baby, I got this, she never gets to be the person who takes the lead. Maybe sometimes that's the right role for her. So I don't have it rigid or locked in, but I do think you need enough differences that you're not jockeying for the same position all the time.
Got it. This again may be a much bigger topic.
Wait, there's one more thing that I want to say there.
Sure.
This is the best oversimplification that I can possibly come up with. So I'm going to narrow a whole world of like years and years and years down to a couple of things. He needs the intuition that tells him whether now is the right time for him to take the lead with her or whether it's to follow her lead. And he needs the self-esteem and the courage to trust what his intuition is telling him and actually act on it, even though it's scary or risky to do it. So I focus, if I had to narrow it down, I focus on his intuition and his confidence and self-esteem. And everything that's on the other side of what it is he wants and hungers for is on the other side of developing those two things.
And at what point does it transition from you being the person who's verifying the calibration to the person and trusting their...
As short as possible. When I'm working with someone, my goal is for them to graduate from needing me as soon as possible. I'm not one of those coaches who tries to extend the coaching relationship. I try from the beginning to give them everything that they need and get them to have it so that they don't need me anymore as quickly as possible. Typically, I will work with someone either for about 3 months and then they're good to go, or about 9 months and then they're good to go, depending on the magnitude of the work that we're doing.
Got it. Yeah, what I was going to mention is I imagine couples come to you in different states of their relationship. Some very committed to each other, some high turbulence or high problematic. And I think one thing that happens in relationship, and I think John Gottman talked about this a little bit, is are the people just trying to get their needs met, or are they also, do they have high regard for their partner? And I bet some couples come and they're just like both vying for their own needs. And I'm wondering, what's the journey like to get them back to a collaboration and wanting both needs?
Fantastic question. I love that question,
Hmm.
because that brings me back to this concept that is that is undefined, but I keep using this word connection. So
Hmm.
what you're describing is a state of disconnection.
Hmm.
And remember, when you're connected to someone, you're feeling what they're feeling.
Hmm.
So when I'm connected to someone, when I'm connected to a woman, I'm highly motivated to her happiness so that I can co-experience that. Her pain and suffering is excruciating to me. Her happiness is fulfilling to me, and vice versa. Like it ends up being mutual. And so when they're vying for their own, like this is my needs, and they can't actually feel, I'm going to use woo language here, but can't feel each other. They can't
Hmm.
feel
Hmm.
like they're non-confronting. They're non-confronting what the other person is feeling.
Hmm.
Like the more connected you are, the harder it is for you to hurt the other person. And this shows up in the bedroom, right? So when you're connected with someone and you're having sex with them, it becomes very hard for you to hurt them. It's very hard for a woman, for me to be doing something, and then I do something that just doesn't feel good to her, and me not know. Like for it to be that I'm in here having a grand old time, like I'm having a lot of fun, and she's not. This is two people who are disconnected. They may, their
Right.
bodies are rubbing on each other, but they're not connected.
Got it. And one thing that I sort of hear implicitly, so I'll ask you is, I hear a belief on your part that people both can get their needs met.
100%. It is absolutely vitally necessary that both people get their needs met. But the way that I get there is through them being connected to each other. I explicitly, and I'm kind of controversial in this way, but I often have people say, we've been in this long relationship. It's really strong. And the biggest thing we had to learn was that, you have to compromise. You really need to learn the art and the skill of compromise in order to have good relationship. And I understand what they're saying, but it also makes me cringe, because compromise in my mind is where you came up with something you want separate
Mm.
from your partner.
Mm.
And then now you're upset because you're not getting something that you came up with on your own. And so I orient couples towards co-creation, where everything that involves the both of them, they need to come up with together. Because your partner is not going to give pushback on something that you came up with together, number one. And number two, this is so important.
Mm.
What you come up with together can exceed what you came up with on your own. Like what you come up with together can be better than even your best idea of what you would come up with yourself. And that's part of why we're in relationship, is because we know we can co-create something better than either of us can come up with on our own.
That's such a great and exciting idea, and it's so important. I see that in companies a lot, that so much of the internal conflict is simply a product of people coming up with objectives on their own and not including everyone.
Right.
So that's a very deep topic.
Yep.
So two more questions. One, is there anything that you just wanted to speak to before we finish up? And then I want to make a teaser for hopefully next time.
Great. Uh, my vault is vast. It's a pretty open-ended question. I could talk for 5 hours. So let's just, I mean, I think oh, okay. Yeah, I do want to. So the process of developing relationship ESP.
Right. Okay. Yes.
Number one, so the scenario is you have no idea what the fuck is going on with your partner. So step one, take your best guess. Take a guess. What do you think is going on with her? Step two, don't analyze why you think that's what's going on. Like, don't bring your analytical mind to just for a minute. Like, don't analyze it. Just say, what is your intuition? Step three, tell her or ask her. Ask her, is this what's going on for you? Or like, I had the sense that you're mad at me because, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just checking with you to see if that's true. Something along those lines. Step four, let her give you feedback on whether that's true. Have a dialogue about what it is you think you're feeling. But at the level of what you think you're feeling, not at the level of something she did that you can analyze. And then let that percolate in your psyche and, kind of polish your spidey sense.
Got it. Yeah, and I wanted to mention something you said on another talk, which is that you're not just taking the words of his or her response to you, but you're gauging the whole thing.
Right.
In other words, in NLP, we talk about separating content from kind of the form of the communication. So if the person says, no, I'm fine. That's a very incongruent sort of,
right.
So trying to get past that level.
Exactly. Right. Your spidey sense is also activated, or your intuition is also activated in the communication itself.
Great. Well, okay. And now the teaser, maybe we'll chat again. And, I had asked you earlier what you believe some of the key components are that go into a healthy or successful relationship. And certainly we've talked about some today, but I think it'd be great to have a broader conversation about that as well.
Love to. I touched on a couple of them, but yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And looking forward to chatting with you again.
Likewise.
All right.